Hi, and welcome to Kay Let's Talk, the podcast where we break down storytelling across books, television, and film with a special love for book-to-screen adaptation. Here, we talk about craft, character arcs, structure, dialogue, visual language, and the creative choices that shape how a story lands. If you like thoughtful conversational deep dives into the stories you can't stop thinking about, you're in the right place. Let's talk. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to be talking about episode 3 of Heated Rivalry, titled Hunter, which covers our favorite man, Scott Hunter, captain of the New York Admirals and the United States men's hockey team, and Kip Grady, the adorable barista that he strikes up a relationship with. I recorded this video where the audio was pulled from before reading their book, so this is not going to be a scene-by-scene breakdown per se, more of a dissertation on how the episode was filmed and constructed, the dialogue, how effective the coloring of the episode works for them, and how they were able to capture the essence of an entire book in under an hour of TV. I truly think this is one of the best episodes of TV I've seen in a very long time, and that is only possible because Jacob Tierney put so much thought and intention into it. And I think I can speak for a lot of people that watched it, that we were surprised when episode 3 was not featuring Shane and Ilya, but rather Scott and Kip. And then by the end of the episode, we're madly in love with their love. So without further ado, here is my breakdown of episode 3 of Heated Rivalry. Episode 3 of Heated Rivalry is one of the most complete and impressive episodes of television that I've ever seen, because in under 49 minutes, it introduces 2 brand new characters, tells their entire love story, and somehow still exists completely in service of Shane and Ilya's larger arc. It's shorter than the cottage episode, and yet it accomplishes so much. And that's for 3 specific reasons. The pacing is perfect, there's very smart visual storytelling, and the script understands exactly what it's doing and what it needs to accomplish. And we know so much about both of these men so quickly. Kip is artsy, he's applying to grad school, working multiple jobs, he has friends, community, a loving, supportive dad. Kip has been out and accepted for years, and Scott is in contrast to that. He has been hiding for years. His parents died when he was young. Hockey saved him, and because of that, he feels like he owes it everything, and that is a difference that defines every choice they make. I think what's attractive about the Scott and Kip relationship is that it feels more traditional. There's a meet cute, they fall in love, they spend actual time together, they talk, which compared to Shane and Ilya, who spend most of their time in stolen hours, in secrecy, and are stuck in an emotional gridlock for the better part of a decade, Scott and Kip are easier to understand, which is the point. This episode really isn't just about Scott and Kip, but serves as sort of a control group for viewers to better understand Shane and Ilya. And that starts with the pacing, which is immaculate. We had already had hints that Scott might be gay in previous episodes, but this episode confirms it very cleanly and intentionally. And I love that we open the episode revisiting this same shot and splitting it into point of views. So we got Shane's already. This, we are seeing how the same moment lands on Scott, and the slow pan in on Scott's face paired with the very first notes of I'll Believe in Anything, not the full song, just the beginning, is setting a very intentional framework for the payoff that we get in episode 5. Because our ears perk when we hear those notes again, and we associate it with Scott and Kip when those first notes play in episode 5. The episode then rewinds 4 months before the Olympics, which quietly tells us that this story is happening around October of 2013 and places it directly alongside Shane and Ilya's main timeline. It also reminds us that this is happening at the same time, under the same league, the same pressures, the same unspoken rules as Shane and Ilya's story. What this episode does beautifully is show us how Scott and Kip communicate. They're direct, they're honest, they're careful but not evasive of what they need to communicate about. And at the beginning of their relationship, when Scott tells Kip what he wants, neither of them really asks for more than the other can give. Scott is very clear when he tells Kip what he can offer right now and what he wants, and Kip hears him and is okay with it. So he tells Scott, I think I would like to be here when you get back. Scott wants Kip now, but can't be with him publicly. He's still living in the headspace of not yet. And Kip says he's okay with being together for now until it becomes unbearable because he wants to be together publicly. And when they eventually break up, it's not because anyone lied, it's because the moving target of someday becomes unbearable for Kip. They do a great job of creating a shared language between Scott and Kip. They have jokes about serial killers and visual cues and mentions of sunshine. The socks is a great metaphor by the end of the episode. And all those small phrases become emotional shorthand, which is reflective of a real relationship. One I noticed most, though, is that over the course of their relationship, they say things like, you really can't keep doing this. We don't actually have to do this. You don't have to do this. Until eventually in episode 5, when Kip says, you don't have to do this, Scott says, I really do. And that's, again, directly tying us back to Scott and Kip being important in understanding Shane and Ilya, because it shows how even when two men communicate well, even when love is mutual, hockey is still an obstacle. Scott says he can't come out because too many people depend on him, which mirrors Ilya's fear of being sent back to Russia and Shane's reality as an Asian Canadian player in a deeply white sport. The fact that Shane and Ilya are on rival teams is a bigger part of this equation for them. But Scott's story helps paint the picture that the need for secrecy isn't just a personal choice, it's very much cultural in hockey, because it's one thing to be a queer hockey player in a sport that's deeply homophobic, but it's another to be two queer hockey players on rival teams. Boston and Montreal have been rivals for 100 years. The narrative the league has built around Shane and Ilya is also enormous. So yes, the league, the teams, fans will react badly to their star players being queer. That's the assumption. But you also have to understand that fans finding out that their leader was not loyal to them, that they were lying to them, is a huge deal. And Yuna actually brings that up at the dinner table in the finale. Loyalty is a huge thing in hockey culture. It's one of the only things Yuna seems genuinely concerned about upon discovering Shane and Ilya are together. Some fans might not care about Shane or Ilya being queer, but on the whole, culturally, you can't expect them to be okay with you hooking up with someone on a rival team. The use of lighting and visual cues in this episode is another really awesome storytelling device that they use. The Kingfisher is always red, and the majority of Kip's yearning for Scott takes place in there. Red can often be used to convey love, passion, energy, rage, danger too. We also see a lot of orange used in more romantic moments. It's a symbol of happiness, warmth, enthusiasm. We see it when Kip and his closest girlfriend Elena, who is helping to frame the narrative that Kip's friends and family are a huge contrast to what being queer in the hockey world is like. Kip is surrounded by people who make him feel good about himself, and that is a visual representation with the lighting. Yellow is another color that we also see a lot because it embodies joy, happiness, hope, and sunshine, which is a word that's actually used a lot in this episode as well. When Scott sees Kip for the second time, he's dressed in a yellow shirt, like literal sunshine. When Kip is at home with his dad in their house, he's bathed in yellow light, and all of the walls in their living room are yellow. And again, I think it's important to introduce a character like Kip here because he's the first person not attached to hockey that we've seen living out their life as a queer person with a support system and family that loves him and no reasons to hide who he is. Even when Kip returns home after the breakup, he's bathed in this warm yellow light from his father. The use of the color blue is also really symbolic in this episode, and this shot in particular is one of my favorites because when Scott and Kip leave the event and walk into the alley, the lighting and both characters physically leave the warmth of the orange light inside and walk into the blue light. This is the first cue of them hiding in plain sight in public. We can kind of see the screen is split here between the blue and the orange. When they are alone in Scott's apartment, they are back in that warm yellow-orange light. Then we get this switch over to blue light when they start hooking up in private. There's even an orange lamp in the room amongst all the blue. It goes back to the warm orange glow in Scott's apartment when they decide that Kip is going to stay. And then after Kip starts realizing that he's not happy with hiding anymore, we see him in this blue wash when closing up the shop, and also when he's holding his phone in Scott's apartment. When he's lying to his father, the lighting is cold. It has a cold connotation. To me, the single best metaphor in this episode is Kip's suit, which is marked "For My Man," hanging in a closet bathed in blue light. Because Kip is in Scott's house, talking to his dad, lying about his life, waiting to hear what his future is going to look like with school, while the physical symbol of their relationship is literally hidden in a closet. He's losing enthusiasm for a life like this, and the lighting tells us that before he says it to Scott. When Elena tells Scott that he deserves sunshine too, that's the moment everything changes. She tells him nobody wants to be kept a secret, and that's obviously the case for Kip being kept secret, but also foreshadows Shane and Ilya and what they'll be dealing with throughout season 2 as well. So by the time we see Scott and Kip after winning the cup, it isn't just romantic, it's proof that doing the hard thing is possible. And that's the underlying message that Ilya sees on TV. It's possible. When we end the episode back in Sochi and Scott is wearing Kip's socks in secret, it's devastating because the love is already there. Scott just doesn't think the hockey world is ready for it yet.